Thank you, Mr. Assistant Speaker. Mr. Speaker, keeping the community safe should be a core pillar of the ACT's justice system. You only need to pick up the newspaper to see that community safety is a mythical concept in the application of the ACT's bail decision-making. Day in, day out, we see the list of victims in Canberra growing at the hands of offenders who are known to police, known to prosecutors, and known to the courts for violent crimes, and yet have been permitted by our legal system to enjoy their freedoms in the community at the expense of others. Let's just have a look at some examples in recent weeks. 7 teenagers arrested for their alleged involvement in multiple home invasions and car thefts, all known to police, all in the community on bail or subject to good behaviour orders. All had been arrested more than 190 times, with one with more than 70 charges against him. A 15-year-old boy accused of violently robbing a pedestrian and repeatedly assaulting a shop owner while on bail. A 31-year-old man accused of inflicting grievous bodily harm to a shop assistant, also while on bail. A 22-year-old man charged with possessing and firing a gun in public, also while on bail and subject to good behaviour orders. Everyone agrees that this is unjust, but no one is willing to make it stop. It's the same offenders, only with new victims. Victims who could have been spared injury, trauma and financial loss if only the ACT government and the judiciary had first spared a thought for them. In 18 months to February 2025, police made 1,860 arrests of people on bail. In just 10 months of the 2023-24 financial year, 17.3% of arrests by police with a breach of bail charge were of young people under the age of 18, and that's up from 11.9% in 2018-19. Due to the high volume of people on bail in the ACT and various demands on policing, the ACT's Chief Police Officer Scott Lee has said it is impossible for police to undertake manual compliance checks for everyone on bail. And so the tireless efforts and limited resources of our police officers is diverted to a perpetual cycle of catch and release, a merry-go-round of criminals, both young and old, whose crimes become progressively more severe as they grow in the knowledge that the legal system will not hold them to account. Our officers join the force largely because they are driven by a sense of duty to protect thy neighbour and keep their community safe. And when they've put their lives on the line to do just that, their work is undone by a broken bail system and questionable judicial discretion. The presumption of innocence is a critical principle in our legal system. It imposes on the prosecution the burden of proving the charge, which is a necessary protection of human rights. But what it should not do is give the judiciary licence to throw reason and common sense out the window in the application of bail. We need to look at decisions that tip the balance of favour to repeat violent offenders by continually granting them bail even when their history points to a serious future threat to community safety. And I'm not talking about an occasional error of judgment that leads to a rare community grievance. This is a pattern of behaviour from bail and sentencing to parole, where we are seeing both the charged and the convicted let loose into the community for reasons that defy common sense. Convicted rapists, child sex offenders and domestic violence offenders are released to serve their sentence in the community. Just how safe is the ex-wife of a convicted domestic violence offender who threatened to tip napalm on her and set her alight, who smashed her face into a brick wall and tried to run her over with his car? This man has been released to serve his sentence in the very family home where the violence and offending occurred. And of course, bail, which is the substance of my motion today, is being handed out like lollies to repeat offenders with a known history of crime. The justice system is evidently not working. It is failing to protect the community, and in doing so, it is inadvertently creating more victims. The ACT government needs to do better. The ACT government needs to restore the balance between justice, community safety, and individual rights. I've been heartened to see recent moves by the Victorian Labor government to address many of these very issues in their own justice system. In Victoria, youth crime by repeat offenders on bail has spiralled totally out of control. As one Victorian mother told the ABC, the justice system had failed her family and her 15-year-old son, and I quote, "He's had multiple cautions and charges and bailed 5 times, and as a result of that, his offending has progressively gotten more severe," she said. Similar concerns from Canberra families have been raised with my office. The Allen government, they've acknowledged they got it wrong, and they've apologised to victims of crimes by offenders on bail. The ACT government should do the same. Victorian Labor has said their new bail laws will be the toughest in Australia. They'll introduce tougher bail tests targeted at repeat offenders and create a second strike rule which introduces a new offence for someone who commits an indictable offence while they are on bail. Most importantly, Victoria will place community safety as the overarching principle for bail decision-making. Today, I am calling on the ACT government to look to their Victorian counterparts to introduce similar laws to keep Canberrans safe and prevent repeat offenders from committing crimes and creating more victims. If Victorian Labor can do it, then so can ACT Labor. Canberrans at risk of violence by repeat offenders who are known to police, prosecutors and the courts will be better protected with laws that puts their safety first and holds offenders to account. And I do think it's important to clarify the scope of what it is we are pushing for today. We do need to be clear that the laws we are advocating for do not permit a militant crackdown on offenders on bail who might innocently miss reporting deadlines or fail to make their paperwork on time. These laws do not advocate for a crackdown on someone seeking bail for a minor offence such as a driving infringement or who has no prior history of crime. These laws are squarely targeted at offenders with a history of violent offences and offenders who commit serious, indictable criminal offences including burglary, drug trafficking, assault and murder while they are on bail. I know there are concerns that tougher bail laws will increase the number of people on remand. That is to be expected, and it's necessary if we are to protect the community from violent offenders who have a history of crime. And I wish we lived in a world where we did not need remand or we did not need prisons. But regrettably, it is an important part of our justice system because it helps us to strike that very delicate balance between justice, community safety, and individual rights. I am also sympathetic to concerns in the sector that tougher bail laws will only make recidivism worse, particularly for juveniles. But this argument, it does not stand to reason. The individuals that these tough bail laws would target are already repeat offenders. They are already racking up a list of victims as their increasing criminal activity goes unaccounted. They are known quantities. When an offender of any age encounters the criminal justice system, it should be seen for what it is, a cry for help. The ACT government and the justice system turns a deaf ear to that cry when it tells offenders there are no consequences for your behaviour. The justice system incites crime when it tells repeat offenders they will not be held to account. True justice, according to the ancient philosopher Augustine of Hippo, is about reordering loves. When an offender encounters the justice system, it's at that point of intervention, if they weren't receiving any help or supports before, that we can set about the task of helping them to get their lives back on track. Leaving them to their own harmful devices is not love, and it can produce no good in our community. In my conversations with Labor, the Greens and Mr. Emerson, you all acknowledged that the bail system does need improvements, and you did express some concerns with the approach that the Liberals were advocating for today. But I did remain hopeful at those conversations that whatever amendments you put forward would at least take us one step closer to preventing repeat offenders and keeping the community safe. And I've seen some of the amendments that have been circulated on the floor, wow is pretty much all I can say. You have certainly obliterated any hope that I held out. My motion gives us an opportunity to finally get right on crime and put community safety first, and so I commend it to the Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I do wish to speak to some of the amendments, and seeing as Labor, the Greens and the Independents have all jumped on the same bandwagon, I'll just approach all the amendments in one go. It's not so much the additions that I take issue with in these amendments, rather it's the omissions. By omitting 1A of my amendment, which is justice outcomes continue to fail victims in the ACT, you are in fact erasing the experiences of victims of crime by individuals on bail. You are erasing their experiences, and you are saying that the outcomes that they have personally dealt with does not matter. So shame.
Shame.
By omitting all of Section 2, you are erasing the experiences of our police who put their own lives on the line every single day to keep our community safe. They put their own lives on the line every single day to lock up or to arrest these offenders who have been arrested, some of them, more than 190 times and had more than 70 charges against them. You are raising their experiences, and you are raising the evidence that the ACT's own Chief Police Officer, Scott
Point of order, Mrs. Morris. Mrs. Morris, if I could just get you to be seated. Point of order.
Mr. Speaker, for about the last 2 minutes, Mrs. Morris has been directing her comments directly to me. She has said the word "you" countless times. I would ask that she adhere to the standing orders and address her comments to you.
Thank you, Ms. Chain. If you could direct your comments through the chair.
Make a clarification. I started my comments by saying that Labor, Greens and the Independents had all jumped on the same bandwagon together. So when I say you, it's in reference to all of these amendments that I'm
Mrs.
speaking
Morris,
to.
if I could just get you to, where possible, just direct your comments through me. Please continue.
Thank you. Yes, so by omitting to all of those opposite, raising the evidence of the ACT's own Chief Police Officer, and you are in fact attempting to rewrite history in the true socialist form. In 4E, which is the current Attorney General has said that she is hopeful that reform will be able to be progressed more quickly. I think it is wonderful that our Attorney General has hopes and dreams for the future, but she also does have power, and she refuses to use it in this instance to keep the community safe and restore justice. When the actions of the judiciary are out of step with community expectations,
interjection directly at Mrs. Morris, so that's not true. I'd ask that if she's going to make comments, they're directed to you.
Mr. Hanson, can you be seated, please? There is no point of order.
She could have been saying that's not true. Pointing out to the Speaker.
Mrs. People, who wants to finish this and go home? Mrs. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, when the actions of the judiciary are out of step with community expectations, it is incumbent on the legislature to reflect on those decisions. And the issues that we've been canvassing today, rather than them being reactionary, these are long-standing issues that even predate Minister Chain's time in this place. Long-standing issues that consecutive Labor Greens governments have refused to address. All rights must be balanced. All justice interventions require a trade-off. This motion is about prioritising the rights of people in the community to live in safety. And for all the Attorney General's lecturing on rights, not once did she mention the right of victims and community safety. How very telling is that? It's very clear from the comments that we've heard from the Attorney General, from the Police Minister, who even managed to pick up the dictionary and find the definition of bail. Thank you very much, Police Minister, for your contribution to this debate. And for the member for Mintabrella and from Mr Raddenbury and Mr Emerson, it's very, very clear that they are all willing to be champions for the human rights of repeat offenders who have a known history of violent crime. But never mind the rights of those in the community to simply be safe. These amendments are, frankly, they're not worth the paper they're written on, which is a great shame, given this is a most serious matter to the community.
Thank you, Mrs. Morris.